Good afternoon, everyone. Let me welcome you to yet another one of our EVC talks. We have prepared amazing guests, amazing speakers for you today. We are going to hold a roundtable, which has a title: "The Importance of Government Strategic Communication in a Crisis Situation: Lessons Learned from COVID-19 Global Pandemic." So it's a very actual topic that we are going to discuss today. I'm hoping for a very rich discussion and interesting questions. You may ask questions below any streaming device that you're using under Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. This roundtable is a joint effort of the European Value Center for Security Policy and Texti.org, and is funded by the European Union through the Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation of the German Marshall Fund. Now, let me welcome our speakers here. We have Maria Hajdak from Center for Strategic Communications and Information Security, based in Ukraine. We have Jakub Goda from Ministry of Health in Slovakia, Jan Asyushkin from Belarus, and Zurab Tsiabrashvili, who is a former Minister of Health of Georgia. Each of our speaker was asked to prepare some introductory opening remarks, which should be long 5 to 7 minutes, and I will ask them to do it now. At first, I will ask Maria for her opening remarks. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to see all of you, all my colleagues from Georgia, from Slovakia, from Belarus. And thank you so much for organizing such an important event and talks for all of us. And I will try to be brief, but yeah, there are a lot of information and questions that we will hopefully discuss during this meeting. Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, the public health system of Ukraine had many problems to solve. To be honest, there was not enough equipment to help patients with coronavirus. Hospitals lacked modern ventilators, sample analyzers, as well as protective equipment for doctors and rapid tests. But in the beginning of the pandemic, the government used different communication aims and strategies to face the pandemic according to the risk management scenario, which was not well prepared at the beginning, to be honest, but none of us was ready for such a situation. So when the pandemic began and in the quarantine phase, communication focused on giving people information about disease, raising awareness about it, motivating health and behavioral change, and informing people about government decision and procedures. And in the coexistent phase, communication focused on emphasizing the necessity of adherence to the health measures, providing information on rework in institution and commercial centers, and involving people in the health and social initiatives. The standard channels of communication for the authorities during the pandemic were the publication of regulation and other messages on website, social media pages, speeches, and comments by officials on televisions. However, this was not enough to meet all the challenges of the pandemic and quarantine restrictions. And in some respects, the government has managed to go beyond the standard communication paradigm by increasing the efficiency of communication. In some, unfortunately not. And I would like to present you some like positive cases. So the regular publication on the Ministry of Health website of zoning data, because right now and since the beginning of pandemic, we, the Ukraine as a country divided in different zones, like the red one, the orange one, and the yellow and the green one, according to the amount of infected people. And this publication determined the need for self-isolation and help citizens navigate the situation and served as an additional source of information for national and local media. And also we launched the government website COVID-19 Gov.ua, and it became an efficient platform which aggregated the most necessary information about the pandemic, including freedom of movement. And also we had the application named Druh, or Friend, and it was used at the beginning of the pandemic to register citizens in need of organized evacuation due to the border closure. But when we are talking about the country's response to the pandemic, there are a number of preconditions that make it more successful. First of all, I would say it is developed infrastructure that either exists in countries due to the previous experience, pandemic experience, for example, or that countries are deploying very quickly in the beginning of the outbreak. Secondly, it is trust in state institution and trust in the science. And the third one is the cohesion of society and its organization and its clear and honest communication. So I would say that trust is one of the key factors in overcoming the pandemic. And the situation regarding the spread and coping with COVID-19 was permanently changing in Ukraine, to be honest. I would say it was big. It has a really negative impact on Ukrainians and has greatly affected the level of trust in the authorities and experts, especially in the field of vaccination. And the second important factor here was the huge flow of disinformation. But I think that we will talk about this deeply later. And Ukraine's vaccination rollout has been hindered by challenges on the demand side, with anti-vax disinformation spreading on social media and high vaccine distrust among the population in general. In March 2021, survey indicated that more than 60% of Ukrainians would not want to get vaccine. As the pandemic continued to create uncertainty and anxiety, it was an urgent need for stronger action and coordinated approach to address fake news and disinformation. And it was clear that without the appropriate trust and correct information, immunization campaigns will not meet their targets and the virus will continue to thrive. Thus, as the number of infected people rose sharply, especially this fall, the state needed to change its tactics and engage with the support of civil society. And I think that it was a huge step forward for us, because the tactics was to explain, first of all, the population that vaccination is needed and that the state is able to provide its citizens with it. Second stage was to create conditions for fast and affordable vaccination. And the third one was to explain why authorities will encourage vaccination and why quarantine and restrictions are needed, especially for those who didn't get vaccinated. And really important role played the civil society, public organization, media, fact-checking organization. They carried out explanatory work and spreading the information about the vaccination and about the COVID and pandemic at the request of the state. And recent initiatives, including media campaigns and relying on health professionals as key influence, have been launched to encourage population to get vaccinated. And as I said before, in the beginning of this year, more than 60% of Ukrainians didn't want to get vaccinated, but now, as of December 15, more than already 45% of Ukrainian of the adult population have received at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. At the same time, 39% of the adult population of Ukraine are fully vaccinated against coronavirus disease. And also it was an initiative from our President Volodymyr Zelensky. He informed that starting from January, 1,000 hryvnia provided by the government to Ukrainians for them being vaccinated, and those money could be used for buying medicines or spending them on different social activities, for example, theaters or movies and etc. As to conclude what I have already said, in Ukraine, the strategy was not the strategy was not really good structured at the beginning, but as the situation got worse and worse for the last 2 years, government has changed the strategy a couple of times, and the recent actions and collaboration with the civil society showed us that just good collaborating and united actions can be good for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for such interesting remarks, especially for mentioning trust issues between society and the government and society and scientists. That's an important issue, and I hope that we will have enough time to address it in the discussion. I'd like to welcome Jakub.
Hello.
Joined a little bit later. So welcome. Are you ready to give your opening remarks?
Yes, sure. But opening remarks in like a general way, or
Exactly.
do you have any more specific question?
No, you should have prepared some opening remarks for like 5 minutes. So if you have something prepared, it's your time now.
Okay. So like, if I should maybe summarize the whole vaccination process in Slovakia, I think we are the example of the country where the vaccine or vaccination has become a cultural and political battle instead of anything else. So this was, I think, the most important factor in the whole process of building trust, because basically we have former prime ministers and we have like clear division, former prime ministers who are like spreading the anti-vax narratives, and we have very clear division between coalition and the government and the opposition political forces on the vaccination. So that's completely the opposite of what is actually needed. So all the other efforts are kind of like in the shadows of this, because the most important people who are the most frequently in TV, in media, or online, who are the most powerful on social media, are frequently spreading the anti-vaccination narratives. So this obviously reveals that the whole vaccination process is more about building trust and about emotions than anything else, because we see that when some of the most popular narratives are spread massively, and when the emotion is already seeded, then all the explanations and all the information kind of is insufficient to basically overcome this. What does work, at least to some partial extent, is are the measures that are really pushing people for the vaccination. So when people are motivated with practical measures to get vaccinated, we can see that there was a rise of vaccination after the lockdown for unvaccinated was announced, and also working with the communities or with specific audiences on more local level or more personal level seems to be at least partially efficient. But when it comes to media campaigns or like this kind of general information campaigns, it seems like people are already resistant, or many people are already resistant for any new information. So even if we debunk or if we counter the popular narratives, it seems that it's just a matter of trust. So people are talking about experimental vaccine. If the EMA or FDA concludes that it's finally finally accepted as a definitive decision that the vaccine is perfectly okay, people still don't believe it. It's the same thing is like some people were asking like who is responsible for the side effects of the vaccines. Now the state said that the state is responsible, but people still don't believe it. So it's really the question of trust and of the emotion, and less about like the actual information process. That's one of the key things. That's what we are trying to focus on in our communication. There was recently a huge influencers campaign, so that it was like a grassroots organization created from some of the really popular personalities from Instagram, who kind of actually reach out to other people who are famous on Instagram. They're spreading this kind of vaccination optimism. It was very viral. It was very popular, but it's unclear how effective it was in actually persuading people. So that's another example of how we can create really good communication, really like popular or well received communication, but still the overall effect it's kind of hard to measure. So let me stop here, and we'll then add on to that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for saying that interesting, not interesting, but very important word in this, which is emotions. You're experiencing very similar things in the Czech Republic. Thanks. I will ask for the opening remarks, Mr. Tsiabarashvili, if you're ready.
Sure. Good afternoon, and from Tbilisi, good evening to everybody. Thank you for inviting such an important discussion. I think it's timely to look back for a year and a half, 2 years, what was done properly and what was not, and just to analyze how respective governments communicated, whether they communicated strategically or not with respective population. I prepared some of the slides which I'd like to share with you if I manage technically. Let's hope that I will. And these slides gives us a snapshot. If you see if you see the slides, unfortunately the full screen does not work. So sorry that you will see a little bit smaller version. But what is on the first slide? This is a snapshot where we stand currently. In terms of deaths, Georgia is number 8, unfortunately, together with, by the way, with some Eastern European countries in cumulative confirmed deaths per million people, and cases number 5. Here is on the graph some other countries from the region participating in this discussion, where we stand for the moment. Czech Republic is number 7, but Georgia unfortunately will overtake Czech Republic in coming days because of the 7-day average numbers for the moment. This is probably all of you seen it, the stringency index. What country imposed what measures, how strict was lockdown, etc. Georgia was one of the one of the countries which initially in the spring of 2020 had a stringency index 100% and had quite long period of time. If you see the green line on the screen, quite strict lockdowns in comparison with other countries participating in this discussion. Do you hear me? Hello. Yep.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Here also is the currently by December 14 percentage of vaccination. Maria spoke about the percentages from the adult population. This is, or you know that this is a share of population from entire population. So Georgia has the lowest numbers in terms of the vaccinated people, and unfortunately that leads also to high death rates, unfortunately, in Georgia. Here you see the number of vaccinated by the age groups, which, for example, shows you that population above 80 is only 20%. Those who are vaccinated with two doses, only 20%. And of course, all my colleagues here spoke about what leads to such a low level of vaccination. Of course, trust or mistrust is the number one issue in every country, including Georgia. What we did, I mean, those who are outside the government and who want the government to help the government. This is one of the examples. There is a well-known NGO here in Tbilisi, Economic Policy Research Center, EPRC, which gathered around 15 experts in the field, including myself. And from the beginning of epidemic in Georgia, we started giving recommendations to the government. These are the number of the first pages of number of documents we send them in writing. What we thought that it would be important to government to take into account, and all of these documents, all of them included the part about the strategic communication. For example, this is one of the last. I think it's the February 2021. Important of the public awareness, quality of communication, and here we speak. Here you see the authors of the documents, or all the previous documents also. Here you see that we all the documents we spoke about that. These are some excerpts from the documents. Boosting public confidence and support. Majority of healthcare experts thinks that there is no communication strategy, etc., etc. So these are the excerpts from those documents. But let me emphasize on some of the issues. Both Jakub and Maria spoke about trust, I repeat, and I concur with their thoughts. We need to turn society into associates in the process, and the strategic communication is important because the people have to understand the real risks and realize their responsibility. This is absolutely important in order to have the trust, whatever the measure introduces the government. Either it's the lockdown or some preventive measures or vaccination, whatever we do, proper communication is important in order to gain trust to the process. And one important slide, I think either Maria or Jakub mentioned that, general political process. All our countries are polarized. This is a slide from IRISE, a recent poll from July, International Republican Institute's poll, and you see that crosstab and correlation between those who express their readiness to be vaccinated and their voting intentions in local elections which we had in November. And you see that those likely voters are more open to the idea of vaccination than those who say that they are unlikely voters or they don't know no answer. And people in urban areas are more informed, and therefore there is more trust among population in terms of getting vaccines rather than in a rural population. So this slide clearly confirms, at least in case of Georgia, but I'm sure the same will be in other countries, what the previous speakers already spoke about. And the last word I'd like to mention is that when pandemic started, I myself at that time was a member of the Georgian parliament, and I voted also initially for the lockdown in the spring of 2020. We didn't have the information, nobody knew what was all about, and of course any government needed time to buy time in order to prepare hospitals and the healthcare sector. By doing this, that time I was an opposition member of the parliament. We showed to the government that we are ready to discuss the issues openly. So if people see that various political forces sitting around the table and discussing the matter and announcing necessary measures all together, that also increases trust within the population. And I think most of the countries, not only the countries represented here, but around the globe, missed that opportunity not to make pandemic a matter of political polarization. But we are humans, and that's why we have preferences, we have stereotypes, and we are, at least in Georgia, in very polarized situation, not only generally in politics, but also how to handle pandemics and, of course, vaccination. So here I'll stop. If there will be some questions, of course, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to also remind to our audience that they can ask questions at any time. In the meantime, I'll ask our last speaker, Jan.
Good evening. I would tell not about happy case. I will tell you examples of bad strategic communication. What happened in Belarus during the pandemic. As colleagues told before, trust it's absolutely the main thing here, and information policy should be consistent and clear. If trust has been lost since the beginning, it's extremely difficult to regain later. Unfortunately, Belarus is an example of loss of trust. At the beginning, when it only started, our Ministry of Health was very transparent in their work because it was absolutely non-typical for Belarus. They created special accounts in social media. They started to publish all the statistics, number of people who is sick, who sent to isolation, who is discharged. But this went on until March, when Lukashenko called coronavirus as a psychosis. And after that, transparency of Ministry of Health disappeared. They started to hide statistics. All press releases which were published at these times was absolutely unreadable. It was like more like rebuses, not like normal press releases, and of course people lost their trust to propositions which our government and medical officials still tried to help and to say. Because from one side we had COVID dissident, from other side we still had normal medical professionals who knew what to do. And the main role in covering what happened and what to do was done by independent media and civil society organization, because if you have a lack of trust to government, it's normal to use civil society resources. I think it's an important point. Second case, this is a case of this year in October. Also, government Ministry of Health, they tried to require to wear masks in all regions of the country, because before it was like each regions they tried to wear mask or not to mask, and it was in one time. And it was first time when fines were imposed for those who do not wear masks. But if we will keep in mind the context of political crisis in Belarus and obvious, firstly, lack of trust, second, fear of authorities to irritate people even more, after 2 weeks of wearing masks, Lukashenko asked for canceling of mask regime in Belarus. It was during pandemic. It was in this October when we had really increasing cases of COVID in our country. So when your informational policy is inconsistent, you can see consequences. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your interesting points. Each of you mentioned trust in your speeches, and the trust between society and the government, and society and the scientists. This is obviously crucial, especially in the time of global crisis, and it's connected with the strategic communication of our government. So I'd like to ask you how the strategic communication of the government of your country has been changing during the time since the pandemic started. Maria, could you start?
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned before, there was no strategy at the beginning because nobody was prepared for such a situation. And at the beginning, the government has some plan how to communicate it. It worked, honestly, and but promises that the government gave to the people, they were just empty. And after a couple of months, people stopped believing the government and stopped believing the information that they gave them. And that's how it didn't work out as is planned at the beginning of the pandemic. And the really bad situation was with the strategic communication between the central government authorities and the local authorities, because people in the local in the regions, they didn't get enough financial support from the government, and the consequences of that were really bad, because as I mentioned in the beginning of my speech, the health system in Ukraine was quite ruined, to be honest. So the lack of financial support and the lack of communication, and people didn't get enough information about the situation with coronavirus, and they are more likely to be influenced by the disinformation and fakes, because they do not have that much access to the information. So this strategic communication was not really good implemented in the beginning and during the first year of the pandemic, I would say. But it has changed somehow during the last week, and especially this fall, when the situation was really crucial. So I would say it probably we just learned some bad lessons and some experience, and that's how it has changed, but not as good as we would like to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. I can deeply relate to this. Okay, anyone who voluntarily would like to follow?
Yeah.
Okay, Tura, you can.
Yeah. Actually, we all spoke about trust, but we none of us mentioned in the opening remarks the importance of time. When you leave the public space empty, and proactively the government does not provide proactively information to the public, then all this anti-vax propaganda machine fills this empty space and creates such stereotypes within society, which then later on, how proper communication you may have at the later stage, you cannot eradicate some of the already seeded stereotypes. And actually, all of our societies are fighting with that. So stereotypes about vaccination, about corona in general, and vaccination are so deeply rooted now, and now you need a double effort to overcome them rather the efforts you needed at the beginning, if you had proper communication. And also when Maria was speaking about at the beginning of pandemic, typically governments want to declare a victory, right? They want to declare that we are victorious. We made a success. So Corona is over, and that's why at least the Georgian government rushed into the very strict lockdown, which, if you have a lockdown for 3 weeks, which is from epidemiological point of view important, okay. If you have 4 weeks, okay. But if you have the lockdown for 3 months, then then people start questioning the measure, and then trust toward lockdowns or whatever the measures are goes down. So I think when we speak about trust, missed opportunities from the beginning is the key, because now time passed, and now we have to redouble the efforts in order to fight against these stereotypes.
Thank you very much. It was actually my follow-up question about Russian and Chinese disinformation and its involvement in this whole information mess. But I specifically would like to ask Jakub about the change of the strategic communication, because I realized that at some point the Slovak Ministry of Health sort of changed this strategic communication approach towards COVID and especially COVID-related disinformation. So, what happened there?
Well, maybe you should specify what exactly do you mean, because when we are talking about the general communication, the government communication, I'm not sure. I mean, it is kind of unstrategic still. So,
Right.
are you maybe referring more to the online activities of Ministry of Health?
Yes, exactly. Because I have seen a lot of your infographics and very interesting graphs and pictures that are very easy to read and they're very explanatory for a regular citizen. And I don't think that this was happening right from the very beginning.
Right.
So,
Yes. So that's actually something that I've tried to actually bring to Ministry of Health. So we try to approach social media like much more actively than it was usually the case in the government sector. The most important thing that I think we are doing is actually spending a lot of time creating our own content. It's not only about like transferring the usual communication to social media. That's important as well, but we are focusing a lot on creating our own like infographics, videos, all sort of like explanatory material that we are using on social media, and it seems to be quite efficient in a way how it's popular and how it's being spread. So not only it's quite visible on social media itself, but it's quite attractive for journalists as well. So what we are saying is that when the official institutions are using this kind of the modern or easy to approach language and this kind of fresh way to communicate, it is popular for journalists as well. So we end up seeing our graphs or graphics in TV, in evening news, in political debates, all over the printed media, even tabloid media. So that's a very positive externality of like the official communication. Even if we create just like a normal social media post, if it is interesting enough, if it has the added value, there is a chance that it will be spread quite widely through the media and through the politicians. So that's one of the things that I've learned, that it's kind of different to communicate on social media. If it is official communication, it's much more important, and the weight and the authority of this sort of content is quite high. So that's something that probably Ministry of Health is doing quite well, the online part itself. But there are obviously like many other channels or many other ways that needs to be done, where we are, I think, quite behind. But the online part of the communication, I think, is interesting, and it seems like the combination of official authority and official institution with the fresh language, with the informal language, with the nice visuals and easy to read content, that kind of seems to be working.
thank you. I'll maybe have just a quick follow-up question. What kind of response do you get from the regular audience, from the regular citizens?
So it depends. If you are asking about the comments underneath the post, so it's very negative. There are two ways how to look at it. The first is that it's negative, so that's bad, and we should be depressed. But the other one is that because we have so many negative comments, it means that we're actually reaching out to the wide audience. So it's not only people who already are vaccinated and who know everything about vaccines. We obviously reach out to all sorts of groups in population and to many people who are unvaccinated as well. So that's part of the reason why it's negative. Another part is just inherent way how Facebook actually works, that people who wants to leave positive feedback usually use likes or shares, and people who want to be critical, they usually post a comment. So that kind of like creates a distorted image of the responses. So but that's that's one of the one kind of feedback. Another kind of feedback is like it's pretty popular in a wide audience. We see like a huge media attention, and even if we kind of get engaged in the discussions ourselves, then we see that there's like this kind of silent majority of people suddenly sometimes they react to some of the comments, and we see that there is like a huge majority of people who are like completely normal, constructive people who are following the profile, and they most of the time they are just silent because they cannot be bothered to kind of enter this kind of like junk discussions. But when we give them some kind of like rational content or rational debate, they suddenly appear, and we see that there is like a huge amount of normal people who are just silently watching, the anti-vax comments appearing. But apart from that, that's only part of the feedback. The other part is probably what we hear from people on other channels, and we see that it is well received, this sort of communication. But it still is only one of the channels. I think what is underappreciated is more direct and more local and more personal level of communication that cannot be spread through the internet or through the mass media. I think this is something that it's underappreciated, and I think there should be more focus on building or working with different target groups, with different audiences, with different sectors on a regional level. And this is, I think this doesn't work that well.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I
you would
may,
like to, sure.
To add, none of us mentioned yet also the one key, the Jakob just mentioned the important aspect that with different segments you have to speak with different voice, and as all the studies showed, family doctors and in general medical staff is the key in communicating information about vaccination, especially, and that's why it's important that in this strategic communication to use most trusted people for the society in this communication. So we have to focus not only what to say, but it's important who says that, and this who is are doctors, especially medical doctors. The surveys and research in US and other countries show that doctors, especially family doctors, are the ones whom families trust the most, and that's important to use that leverage during communication.
Okay, thanks. Right, we already kind of established that the strategic communication on different levels is one of the key things that has to be improved in all of our countries. I'd like to ask Jan, because the situation in Belarus is obviously a little bit different because of the character of the regime. So I would be interested in to know how Russian or Chinese disinformation is entering the information space in Belarus. If the government is really doing it by itself, or the foreign disinformation is influential enough.
Firstly, when all informational campaigns only started, Lukashenko was main source of disinformation even for Russia, because Russian government, they have troubles with communication because Lukashenko he was quite popular in Russia, and his narratives about healing of COVID by vodka, hockey, and tractor, they became quite popular in specific segments of Russian society. And after that, Russia started to use COVID topic in Belarus as a hybrid tool. Their channels of disinformation started to spread the narrative that Lukashenko failed to deal with coronavirus, and Russia should provide humanitarian operation, humanitarian intervention, or how to say, or how is also possible to name it, to fight, to deal with consequences about what happened, what should happen in Belarus with COVID. It was at the beginning of pandemic. Of course, after some time, after 1 year, context absolutely changed. But what we see as a result of all these informational campaigns, for example, Belarusian people, they trust more to Western vaccines, especially to Pfizer, than to Sputnik. But in Belarus, only Russian and Chinese vaccines are available. And if people they had possibility to choose which one, I'm sure that Pfizer especially would be the most popular vaccine in Belarus. But it's not a topic, of course, for anti-vectors segment of audience, because for them it should be absolutely different campaigning and communication. It's also possible to talk with them, but not in these conditions. And also, I'm absolutely agree with previous speaker that the key for the best communication it's cooperation of government and non-government actors.
Great, thanks. We have one question from the audience to everyone. Do you think that if governmental strategic communication would be stronger, impact of anti-vaxxer groups would be lower? Wouldn't they just increase the amount of disinformation they produce? So, is there anyone who would like to start answering that question?
Actually, Veronica, when I spoke about the timing, that we missed the opportunity from the beginning to communicate properly, and then you need to double the effort. This is what I meant. If we would have, from the beginning, proper strategic communication, of course, the impact of anti-vax groups would be lower. I strongly believe in that. But now, the feelings, emotions, stereotypes are deeply rooted, and it's too difficult to fight against that.
Okay, thanks. Maria, would you like to add something to that? We can't hear you.
Excuse me, yes.
Right.
So yeah, answering this question, I would say that the people, anti-vaxxers, they don't always like just the, I would say, conspiracy theorists, and they do not always have like the strong belief in the anti-vaccination. Quite often they just lack of information and the trust, as we mentioned before. So to analyze the whole situation, because it's really complicated to get all the information together, and as we know, the healthcare system is really vulnerable one. So if the governmental strategic communication would be stronger, it would at least make people believe and trust the governmental actions more, and dig deeper into this problem, and do not just believe on everything that they hear from the television or what they get from the social media and etc. So the governmental strategic communication should build the trust to its actions and to the expert meaning and explanation. So that would be like really helpful for people to understand what is going on.
Thanks. Jakub, how do you feel about that?
I think I'm a little bit more skeptical, actually. I think when it comes to vaccination, I think it's one of the topics that I believe would be difficult, even if you do like a perfect strategic communication by government, like since the very first moment. Until we have like opposition that is undermining the vaccination, and until we have like strong forces within the society that are undermining the vaccination, it would be difficult. In any case, it could be a little bit better. I think so. I think it could have been better. The results could have been a little bit better, but like we have almost 50% vaccinated. So if everything would be done perfectly, we would have maybe, I don't know, 55. I don't believe like we could have like 80% just because we would communicate perfectly until we have these sort of like former prime ministers undermining the process and the whole disinformation scene, doing it really systematically. I don't think it's realistic to think that you could have prevented this completely. Surely the communication could have been stronger earlier on, but then if we, it's a benefit of the hindsight. It's looking back, but when we really remember where we were at like 1 year ago, there was no vaccine really that would go through controlled trial. There were only like vaccines in progress. People at that point, I remember it quite clearly, people were adapting the existence of COVID. Like they believed that COVID was a flu. It was like a massive thing in Slovakia. People didn't really believe that the COVID is a real deal and a really, really like dangerous thing. So we were just trying to actually explain that this is the real danger. Like just because we had like a calm summer, it doesn't mean that COVID is not dangerous. So we were focusing really on this. And if you just mentioned the vaccine, like it was kind of like science fiction. It wasn't ready yet. It didn't go through all the clinical trials. We didn't have enough information. Even like experts at that point, I remember it quite clearly, even like the doctors that I was talking about, they were like, oh, I'm not sure. I mean, it needs to be tested properly. I wouldn't talk about it right now. We need to wait. We need more time. So like there wasn't really a space for like a massive campaign 1 year ago, because really like I asked authorities, I asked doctors, and they were unsure themselves. So obviously we needed first to have like the vaccine that passed through the control trial. So I think the very first moment for the campaign was like maybe December or January. But then there was another issue. Like in the beginning, there was a huge demand for vaccines and lack of supply of vaccines. So if we were campaigning in television massively at that point, like people would be, like super nervous about it. So that was another reason why, it didn't have, it was kind of like counterproductive to do a huge campaigning at that point. So it seems to be very popular to look at it from the hindsight in this way. Like we should have been, since like 1 year ago, we should have been like properly communicating everything. But if I properly remember and like chronologically reassess the whole development, it wasn't really that it was kind of more complicated in every single phase of the process. So I think what should have been stronger was like March or April, where for the first time it was like it was very clear that the vaccine is working perfectly, and the demand was starting to be higher than the supply. At that point, there should have been a much more massive campaign and like a stronger strategic communication from the authorities, from the politicians, to really like use the momentum and to vaccinate as many people as possible in a short period of time. That was like a point where I think we should have been stronger. And like in general, it would be better if the government was able to communicate more efficiently, more actively. Like that's true for, I mean, in general, and it's true for the government leaders that they should have been more active, more consistent with their communication and stuff like that. But I would just conclude and repeat, even if we had like the perfect communication from the government, I believe the vaccination rate would be a little bit higher, but I don't believe it would be like dramatically different.
May I show Veronica
Sure.
the one slide again? If I share the screen now, yeah, this is the slide from again. It's the IRI poll conducted in February and June, and Jakub just was saying that that in initial phase we had better situation. This slide shows exactly that. In February, much more people were keen to be vaccinated than was in June.
Yes.
Which tells you that, of course, the situation was not perfect in February either, but it tells you that with the proper communication, we would have much better situation right now. But unfortunately, anti-vax groups overtook the public space because the governments, not only in Georgia but in many countries, did not do anything proper. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more question from the audience, and it's actually quite interesting one. So lately in the Czech Republic, various online groups started to share memes and visual content containing well-known disinformers and anti-vaxxers promoting getting vaccinated. The manipulated content is shared with good intent as well as to get back at the anti-vax community. I think either way, it's still fake news. What are your thoughts on that? So maybe Jan.
I think if you'll see, if you think about it from point of ethic, of course, it's a very unethical method. From other side, I'm sure that it can be effective method. If, for example, you have mostly we have two type of anti-vaxxers. Firstly, this is people who just don't trust the government and they have a huge lack of knowledge about science, and you can work with them from science position, from normal position. And second type, this is a person who really believe in conspiracy theories. And for them, I'm sure that only that against conspiracy theories can work only another conspiracy theories.
Thank you. Maria, what are your thoughts on that? Do you maybe experience something similar in Ukraine?
No, not that I know of, but there is this is a really like tricky situation, and people should pay good attention on everything that is spread on the internet, and we could probably guess where the roots of all these campaigns from, because those tactics, they are pretty similar to the disinformation and fake news about coronavirus that we have in Ukraine spreading through the Telegram channels, for example, mostly, and they are changing the tactics from time to time just to get people confused. So there is no reason to believe and to trust to such messages, and always be prepared for that the information can change and people just get more confused they are right now. So I think that's really dangerous, even if they spread information about vaccination and the positive side of that.
Thank you. Mr. Tsiavashvili.
I would agree with Maria. Actually, anti-vax groups are well organized. Jakub was speaking about the comments, and the same is in Georgia. I mean, whatever the platform you go in social media, they are full of their comments. And what is what they try to convince people about is that somebody, either Bill Gates or whoever, George Soros or whoever, tries to manipulate with the population with this coronavirus, and then with the vaccine and with the therefore, if we start playing with their methods, actually we will be playing on their grounds and we will lose. I think I would agree with Maria that it's dangerous.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jakub, I'm sure you've seen some of these memes. Do you feel that this could be the proper strategy to use? We don't hear you.
You can hear me? Can you hear me now? Yeah, to be honest, I don't have a strong opinion about it. I think by itself it's like a funny initiative that I believe can attract attention. That's what I'm sure that it can do. I'm not sure how it is what it is possible to convert some people or really like influence people who are against vaccination towards vaccination. I think what it could work if it would be part of something bigger, like if this would be like one of the tools that was used within some wider and more complex campaign, and like this would be a tool to attract attention and then use some other messaging or do some other activities that would be more persuasive towards vaccination. That could be interesting, but by itself, I think it's just a funny internet material that it's kind of viral and attractive. But I can't really measure or estimate like how it can really persuade people by itself. I would be more like skeptical probably, but at the same time I'm not against. It's okay to do this sort of thing. Like it's probably not something that the government could have done, but as a part of like public activities, it's okay.
Thanks. Even yeah, you're right. Even all of you is right. Even the expert community in the Czech Republic is divided pretty much into two the same groups that. One of them is laughing and clapping and saying that it's very innocent and it's just jokes, but the other one is saying that it could be quite dangerous and it just clashes the information space even more and drive people not to trust literally anything on the internet. Thank you for your opinions. I have one last question for you for today. I would like to hopefully finish with like some hopeful thoughts or positive thoughts. So I'd like to ask you if you actually think that the government and maybe even the societies in our countries actually learned something from this experience, since this panel is actually called Lessons Learned. So are you hopeful for the future? Maria, you could start.
It's really I would like to say yes, that we have learned something, as I said previously, yes, the strategic of our government has changed, especially, but only when the situation was catastrophic, especially this fall, when we had almost 1,000 deaths per day, and then the actions were like took more actively, and government started to include different like activities and components to provide people with the information and etc. Unfortunately, it was done just after such a high percentage of infected people and deaths. But I would say that all of us probably learn something, and we will never be fully prepared for such situations, but at least the good communication and the trust, as we said before, is a key issues for all of us. So let's hope that we will not lose it in the future according to different situation.
Thank you. Jan? What about you? Your hopes?
My hopes, generally, I think the main lessons, it's not about strategic communication of state. I think mostly people in all countries started to pay more attention to their health, and this is a trend. And this trend can be supported by government, and it can bring results.
Thank you. Mr. Tiabarashvili.
I think too early to judge. I think 2024 would be the year when we can recap and think about how what we are doing with this pandemic, whether we passed it or not, and what are the lessons to be learned for the future. So I wouldn't be neither pessimistic or nor optimistic for the moment. We are still, I think, in the middle of the crisis and too early to judge.
Thank you. And Jakub.
What I can like derive as a positive outcome of all this, at least one of the things, is that much more people are now kind of aware of the importance of the online media space and on the effects of the social media. So I think this has become like the mainstream topic, really. Like a couple of years ago, when I was writing about this thing, it was just a couple of, I don't know, bloggers or journalists who were actually debating about disinformation and this sort of stuff. But now it's really like widely debated mainstream topic. It's like the president of the country is discussing it. It's prime ministers. It's like big televisions are actually focusing on these issues. So it has become really a hot topic, a mainstream topic, and it's not only in Slovakia, it's worldwide. So that means that really wide amount of people, and it's like a popular debate now about like how to regulate social media, how to set up the new rules, what are like the legitimate limits for the freedom of speech. This has become really a central part of the discussion, and that's hopefully that will lead to some new developments when it comes to the regulation, or when it comes to like public debate, or when it comes to actually new legislation in this area. So yes, without the pandemic, I think this would take much longer until it will reach like such a high visibility. So that's something that I think is like a positive externality.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I'm not sure if my strategy to finish with some positive thoughts actually worked. I will leave that to your evaluation, personal. So I would like to thank to all of our speakers for accepting our invitation to participate and for sharing your experience with us and giving us all of these very important points. And I thank you for the questions from the audience, and I will hopefully see you soon, even in person, at least some of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Stay healthy. All the
Goodbye,
best.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.